Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about 10 characters who I love to play, but I don't actually play with. And none of these characters are particularly horrible or, completely trash tier. Even for some of the worst characters in Marvel Future Fight, you can always find a specific place to play them, even if it's just kind of grinding out XP for uniforms in story missions or epic quest missions, or doing low Shadowland stages. There's almost a zone for every single character in Marvel Future Fight. But for these characters, you really have to put in a lot of work to make them even close to viable, and for the majority of the time, either the characters don't feel strong enough for where they should be in terms of how much better they should be, how much better I think they should be based on their power level in the comics and things like that. And also, they just don't feel like, in some cases, they don't feel true to their counterparts, from where the characters are based on. So at number 10, we have Domino. And Domino, although she definitely feels like Domino, which is why I really like playing as her, and she even has this little dice move on her third skill, which is very cool, and it looks really awesome in terms of the animation. She just has a low power level. So you can see here that even though we're doing decent damage for stage 20, which is a very low stage for my cards in my raid level, we've got 2 supports, she's almost dead because her survivability is very low. So she's just a weak character. It's not the offense that's weak, but it's her survivability. It's her defense that is extremely weak. Coming in at number 9, and I don't really grade these in terms of like 1 to 10, but it is Star-Lord up next. And Star-Lord, unlike Domino, he has a lot of iframes, so defense isn't really his problem, it's really offense. Not only does he have really slow movement speed, which makes him kind of annoying to play as when you have to fight in larger stages, because you just realize how slow the character moves, and that doesn't bother every player, but for me it's something that's really annoying. So even when I play different types of games like MOBAs or FPSs or things like that, I always need to choose a character with high base movement speed so I don't feel like I'm just sort of, crawling around the battlefield. I really do get bored and frustrated with characters that move so slowly. But in addition to moving slowly, you can see that his damage is just not very good. Even with double supports, even if you use his own leadership, he's really just a leadership character, but he's got amazing looking skills, and it just sucks that with all this defense and with his amazing looking skills, you really can't do much with Star-Lord as an original character. And the other thing I really like about Star Wars, I like Star Wars too, but the thing that I really like about Star-Lord is he's the first character to have his own music. Before Luna Snow, we had this guy bringing out that 5th skill with the Milano. So I do really appreciate that. He really, like Domino, really feels like I'm playing, especially as the Infinity War version of Star-Lord, but because of his lack of damage, I really can only use him in Shadowland or in ABX as a leadership. Coming in at number 8, we have Hyperneck, aka Hyperion. And Hyperion doesn't have super weak offense, and he doesn't have super weak defense, but he just kind of sucks overall. He's just not very strong overall. He's just an average type character, and in Marvel Future Fight with 200 characters, if you're average, you're in the bottom 100, and that's not a good place to be. And so even with the rework, even with the base kit rework, even though he's one of the first characters to be purchasable for real money, and he's been in the game for so long, Hyperion has just never really met expectations, and that's really what I find so disappointing about him. He's Marvel's answer to Superman. He's supposed to be extremely powerful, and you can see how they get it right in other games like Marvel Contest of Champions, where Hyperion, he's able to buff himself up, and he hits so hard, and he's got the frost breath and all this stuff. But he just doesn't cut it in Marvel Future Fight, and I almost want to say that he needs another rework. I don't think he needs another rework. I think he probably just needs a uniform that'll bring him into 2019. He needs that bearded look where he looks like an absolute badass. But it's just, I always want to play with Hyperion when I look at the character's profile image, when I just see the icon, but then when I get into the match and I'm actually playing with Hyperion, I'm like, oh man, this is Hyperion. He's like a really dumbed down version of Ant-Man in Blue Marvel, and that's just so lame because he's supposed to be on level with those characters, and he's not even close. Coming in at number 6, it's not Thanos with the bald cap, it's actually Ghost. And Ghost, kind of like Domino, is just a character, or kind of like Star-Lord, I guess, is a character who plays extremely close to what we've seen in the MCU and the comics, and yet just doesn't do anything in the actual game. I use her almost every week as a self-clear, as her own DPS for Shadowland, because that's how much I enjoy playing as her. But it really hurts that, once again, if I want to see high-level gameplay of a character doing damage and actually being useful in Marvel Future, well, in Marvel games, I have to go to Contest of Champions for Ghost specifically. She just hits like a wet noodle in Marvel Future Fight, and it's just kind of disappointing when you see a character where there's so much investment in these skill animations. Like, she has beautiful skill animations, they're all unique. She has, you know, so many different effects. There's just so much amazingness packed into this one character. There's cool sound effects, but then she touches you and it does no damage, and you're like, wow, well, what is the point of this character exactly? If we had a game mode where debuff immunity was not possible, like for example, Battle World, if there's no Tier 2 Wasp available, and there's no leaderships, then Ghost becomes a venerable threat, because she can shut down an entire team just like Mantis can. She's got that same aura around her that forces you into this state of fear, constant fear, and she stacks all these different immunities, although you can't tell because Thanos has debuff immunity, as all world bosses do, to basic effects. So you can see above his head, all defense down immunity, shock immunity, blah 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 immunity, fun immunity. There's basically fun immunity on a lot of game modes in Marvel Future Fight, which stops characters like Ghost from being usable. But like, look at this, she's got a green aura around herself. She's got a larger green aura that literally says warning as it rotates around. Like, such cool design. But they decided to give her a baby's fist. So what are you going to do with a baby's fist? You're just not going to use it. And that's basically what ends up happening, unfortunately, for Ghost. Up next is Sentinel. And if you know me, you know how much I love my X-Men. And so, of course, it is only natural that on top of loving the X-Men, I would love their, you know, one of their most quintessential enemies, which is the Sentinels that get sent out by various enemies or on their own to capture or, you know, eliminate the X-Men and the mutant threat. And again, like a lot of these other characters, Sentinel has amazing design. The actual feeling of playing as a Sentinel, in fact, the feeling of playing as 3 Sentinels is absolutely 100% captured by this character. However, the unfortunate thing for Sentinel, his offense is not weak, and his defense is not weak, and he's very, very good for free-to-play players and low-spending players at Tier 1, because of the fact that his clones there will deal damage as if they were Tier 2s, so you always get that Tier 2 bonus for Shadowland. So Sentinel Tier 1 can actually clear up to Stage 30 of Shadowland. The bummer, or the boring part, or the kind of disappointing part, is that he just doesn't do enough of either thing. He's one of those characters that just isn't good enough on offense to be, you know, a big-time threat, a big-time world boss killer or whatever, and he's not good enough defensively, despite all of the buffs that he has. And he has like a laundry list of buffs. If you go and read his passive effect, his Tier 2 effect, his 4-star effect, he's got so many, but he's still not good enough. He still can't cut it to hang with the big boys and the big girls. And I think a lot of people especially would love for Sentinel to be able to do that defensively, because there are so many X-Men that give people headaches, especially in PvP, but also in things like Conquest, like Deadpool, of course, Jean Grey, let's not forget about her, and then even characters like Strife, who are also mutants, and then possibly in the future Namor, possibly the Phoenix 5 if they are coming with another update. There's always going to be future X-Men updates, so I just wish that the OG killer of the X-Men, before Magneto, or maybe at the same time, was the, Trask's Sentinel program. And so Sentinel deserves to be stronger. Whether he needs a uniform or a rework for that to happen, he definitely needs to be the counter, the hard counter to most mutants. They basically just need to dial up his stats. I think if they just multiply his stats by 2, maybe give him a Tier 3 or something, that would be absolute legitness, and maybe we could see some very, very cool, extremely thematic, Sentinels versus X-Men type gameplay. How cool would that be? It would be super cool. Number 5, Cyclops. And Cyclops is interesting for this list because he doesn't really feel like Cyclops when you play him. And he doesn't feel like Cyclops for the 2 reasons that, for one, he's the leader of the X-Men, but he doesn't buff the X-Men. His leadership buffs all allies, so it doesn't count specifically for the X-Men the way that Magneto's does. He also doesn't have the leadership ability, which is insane for the leader of the X-Men. And then for 2, he's not strong, and Cyclops is supposed to be super strong. He's a very strong character, or he's a very strong mutant, but he just doesn't come through in Marvel Future Fight. And even back when he was introduced, He was one of the first characters introduced to have iframe ignore with his third skill right there, but it just doesn't do enough for him. It doesn't do enough damage. There aren't enough hits. It's not an iframe. He doesn't get any sort of immunity or protection when he does it. And so, yeah, his power level is just never really realized. And although he's very fun to play, and I like playing as him because I like, you know, the spinning, I like the iframes there, I like the lasers on the third skill, I like the stun, and of course I love the sort of, you know, continuous beam attack. And it reminds me so much of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which I spent a lot of my sort of middle school days playing at the arcade near my school. His power level and his just overall effectiveness is not coming through in Marvel Future Fight. And that is, of course, why I chose this stage with 1 damage, because this is what it feels like when you play as Cyclops. He really just doesn't do enough damage, and he doesn't have any survivability. At number 4, we have Black Bolt. And Black Bolt, on top of playing a lot like you would expect Black Bolt to play with a lot of these, like, Sonic abilities and sort of these blasts and these roars that he has, which I think are not only good visually, but also the sound effects, like the audio for these skills are cool. But he's just a character who hasn't been updated in years, and despite the fact that the X-Men and the Inhumans have a pretty, you know, serious history and sort of tons of different clashes, and we've even seen X-Men versus Inhumans as part of the faction battle and the faction events, there's just no love. There's no love for Black Bolt whatsoever. And so I would love to see different looks of his. I love how he is in the comics, and I like the way that he sort of brings a different dimension to things because of, you know, the fact that his character is mute 99% of the time. So I just really like that sort of quiet, strong, stoic type character who, you know, doesn't say anything until they absolutely need to, and then when they do, they blow your dome off. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Marvel Future Fight. Black Bolt was kind of good when he first came out, and I remember when he was first good, or when he had his sort of moment. I don't know if I was making YouTube videos at that time. I might have made a video about it, but I was super stoked to play as him when he came out. I was like, man, 5 seconds of immunity on his 5th skill, plus he's got 50% ignore dodge. Man, he's so good. He's good against Corvus. He's good against this and that. And I found so many different ways to play Black Bolt, which is amazing. Now, I don't really have any reason to play him, but in the back of my mind, I still do, and I use him for low-level Shadowlands because I still feel that desire to play as, you know, the king of the Inhumans. Number 3 on this list is Ronin. And Ronin, although he got an upgrade not that long ago for Captain Marvel, which actually made him a lot better. It gave him a heal, gave him immunity, gave him a charge up, like a continuous beam skill, gave him a guard hit. They gave him a lot, but I just feel like in Ronin's case, he is good enough to do certain content on his own. He can do probably some low-level world boss, and he can do Shadowland, you know, pretty well, and he's a good leadership as well for Universals. The thing with Ronin, the reason why I don't use him is there's just better Universals, and I'm using Captain Marvel a lot. I'm using Thor sometimes now, but I use Captain Marvel and Thanos a lot, and then more recently I've also been using Silver Surfer, so I really just don't have a lot of time and a lot of space to put in other Universals. And I don't know about you guys, but when I play, I try to balance things out. I don't want to just play as combat types or just play as one type. I like to rotate through all 4 because they sort of have a different feel to them. And so Ronin just kind of gets left behind, but I think he could be stronger, but I'm satisfied with his strength now. I just have stronger characters that get things done faster and more effectively, and so that's why I kind of don't play as Ronin as much as I should, which I do feel bad for. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have a character like that you really like, but is kind of weaker or slower than the meta characters that you use day in and day out. And so majority of the time when you're getting through your dailies, you either don't have time to spend, you know, playing with a character that's going to take twice as long to clear the same stage, or you just kind of don't feel like taking that extra time and investing that extra amount of concentration to make sure they don't die. Make sure you get through the stage with them, so you can actually say that you used them and you cleared content with them, rather than them just collecting dust on your roster, as my Ronin sadly does. Coming in at number 2 on this list is the Iceman. And Iceman, when he was announced for the update a few months ago, I was over the moon happy and excited to play as one of my favorite Marvel characters, and probably my favorite mutant of all time. However, just because of his lack of usefulness, I guess, in overall game modes, and again, because there are, like Ronin, blast types that can just do what he does more effectively, faster, with less headache, I kind of just didn't find a permanent spot in my roster and in my sort of daily routine for Iceman, because he has an awkward skill rotation. That's basically the only reason why he collects dust on my roster, because his 5th skill has a 20-second cooldown or a 19-second cooldown, so you can't use it every single rotation. And because, you know, when he came out, if you guys were watching any of the videos that I made or other YouTubers made, there was plenty of conversation to be had. How do you rotate through Iceman's skills? What's the optimal skill rotation for Iceman? And we didn't really figure out something that was optimal in a way that felt good. Now, I still love Iceman because of his, I mean, he's Iceman, but his skills are amazing visually. They're just fantastic. They're some of the best in the game. You really do feel like Iceman, although, you know, I would like his power level to be a bit higher if you're asking me, because he is an Omega level mutant, but, I mean, I am biased as well. But I think it's really just the kind of awkwardness, and that also shows the dependence that we've had, or we've come to have in Marvel Future Fight, for characters to have these sort of, in a way, cookie-cutter rotations where, you know, every single, every rotation of 7 or 8 seconds, my 5th skill will be ready, I'll use my 5th skill, blah, 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 rather than having to piece together sort of 2 different rotations that sort of match. You know, sometimes you're proccing on 3, sometimes you're proccing on 5, and so on and so forth. Coming in at number 1, you knew before you started watching the video, of course it has to be Logan. And Logan is probably one of, if not the strongest character on this list, so he's by no means weak. He's not like Domino, he's not like Star-Lord or Ghost or Hyperion or even Sentinel. But the problem with Wolverine is just he's not good enough. And I guess that is partially due to, you know, my own expectations and people's expectations when they read the comics. Wolverine is one of the sort of classic heroes, not only as part of the X-Men, but just in general. You know, he holds and protects Infinity Stones. Like, he is a big deal. He was one of the original members of you know, Marvel movies back in the day when it was just the X-Men movies with Hugh Jackman. And just at the same time, it's just like, yeah, it's Wolverine, I guess. For all the investment, he really doesn't, he kind of pales in comparison. He doesn't really get enough wear and tear because he just doesn't do things as good as anyone else. He's not as good as Namor, he's not as good as Captain America, he's not as good as Mr. Fantastic, and then the same thing extends over to PvP. He's probably the second best combat for PvP after Captain America, but man, yeah, for so much investment and for so much hype, for this unkillable, lovable Canadian, and of course I have to love him because he's Canadian, he's not even the best in any one aspect of the game, even within his own type, even within the type of combat, which we've covered in previous videos as being by far the worst. So that is why he comes in at number 1, and I would love to play Wolverine more, but, you know, Namor's going to smash it, Mr. Fantastic is going to smash it, Captain America's going to smash it. What's the point? So, with that being said, the more interesting, or the extra interesting thing here to add on and tack on at the end, I want you guys in the comments, thank you for watching all the way to the end, by the way, pick one of those characters that I just talked about in this list of 10 characters that I love playing as, but I don't, and I will do a dedicated video for that character, give them, you know, as much love as possible, as much resources as possible, as many resources as possible, and then I'll take them into some possibly high-level gameplay to see how well they can do, to see what their absolute fingertip limit is. Hit me up in the comments down below, let me know what you think, and choose which one you choose. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later today. Take care.